live at Onigashima. I'm Jimmy.
And I'm Anthony, and this is chapter 1130, The Accursed Prince. And oh my god, what a chapter! This is what we've all been waiting for. It's crazy.
This is a chapter of Elbaf that we've all been waiting for the introduction. We said it before the rest. They were just like figuring things out, fooling around on the island. But we're here now.
Here we are. Yeah, and I want to take one real quick cover story analysis here. It's starting to develop a little bit. Yamato and them are sleeping, and we see this like mysterious person stealing a katana. I think we saw some mysterious person doing thievery like earlier on in the thing, so that's going to amount to something somewhere. We'll see. I think,
I have a quick theory about that.
Okay.
I think the person stealing the sword is the same guy that stole Zoro's sword before. I forgot his name, but the one that turns into a fox that was on the bridge.
Yeah.
I think this is going to inevitably turn into a joke, to be honest. I think they're going to catch him and be like, why were you doing that? And he's gonna like shrug and he's like, I'm a fox, I don't know.
It might be a fake out, and then like that leads to something else, like maybe there actually is a bad guy and this isn't them, and like
that could be true too.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes, but let's get into this chapter because there's a lot to talk about. I feel like we got a lot. So we start back up. We're back with the second part of the crew. Frankie laying down the law, being like, listen, they're fine.
I love that, by the way. I love that Frankie's taking charge in all of this.
Yeah.
Because he used to be like, I wouldn't say a captain of this crew, but he used to be like the head of this mafia.
Yeah, he's used to leading.
So he knows how to lead, and he's calling the shots here. Everyone's listening to him too, even the Giants. And I love the confidence he displays. Like, hey, they're not here. They're probably okay then. If
yeah,
not, we
exactly.
seen some dead bodies.
Yeah, I would imagine like out of this group, it's like Frankie and Jinbei are kind of like the leader figures because they both like have that leadership position before. But it's nice to see Frankie like taking up the mantle, and they're going along with it. They ran out of food, so they got to go to Elbaf now. But an interesting thing, we'll just talk about their section a little bit because it kind of jumps around throughout the chapter. But we get some crazy confirmations. Morgan's is out here spreading the good word or the bad word, I guess.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, it's not the good word for us.
But
yeah, a few crazy things with that actually. I mean, the obvious one, the bounty increases for Doria and Brogy were insane. We got One Piece inflation, so that rubs me the wrong way a tiny bit. One, I like the fact that they're accounting for it. But two, we all assume Luffy's final bounty is going to be 5.6 billion to be right above Roger's, and to have that nice 5.6 Gomu number. But if it's inflated now, then he's technically worth less than Roger, which just doesn't sit right with me.
Which means that maybe it's like he gets to that number like earlier. And I would imagine I thought that they were gonna have bounties now. Like everybody thought that the Straw Hat bounties like after Egghead was gonna skyrocket, especially now that they're saying like confirmed like they're being painted as the bad guy, right? Like we all thought that was gonna happen, but like the fact that their bounties haven't jumped up, maybe this is the only reveal for this chapter, and we're gonna get that reveal later. But I would imagine that they get some
a little bit later.
But it's cool. It's cool to see them at 1.8. 1.8 is like an interesting number because it's like they're just under. Like Boa Hancock is 1.9, and then like Croc is 2.1, I think. And so they're not quite Warlord tier, but they're like up there enough. And as it's two of them that have this on the same crew. So I think it very much warrants this. This is the highest bounty we've ever seen for Giants, and I think that like we kind of need this from the Giants. I think this chapter was all about gassing up the Giants because before this, we never really got gassed for the Giants like at all. You know what I mean?
We did in Little Garden, but at this point that was so far away that we were just like kind of underestimating them. We were like, yeah, okay, whatever. Then we saw Harudi, and we were like, okay, cool again. And then Luffy kind of just kicks his ass.
Yeah, in like Gear 2 or whatever.
Not like that much. And we assumed he was going to be one of the strongest because he's the captain of the giant pirates. But I mean, we find out throughout this chapter that that's definitely not the case. Like, I don't want to skip to it too much already, but we know Loki is stronger than him.
I know, dude. So. Yeah, Loki apparently the strongest guy, but
before getting to that though, instead of jumping to Loki, I wanted to mention one more thing about this section of the crew where they were looking at the posters. The giant, or I guess not giant, the X on Luffy's arm, which is clearly a reference to like Alabasta when they met with Vivi. So I really like that Oda sectioned off these Straw Hats specifically, because none of them were the ones that knew about this. It was only the original 6 that are on Elbaf.
Yeah, I like that Robin's kind of the one to point it out, because she was there when, like, right after they had, like, that X mark moment, right? And so, like, she probably would have seen the X's still on their arms, because, like, it happened like back to back. Like Robin is all of a sudden on the ship right after that. You know what I mean? So she says
Yeah,
like,
she just
"Oh,
didn't
this is
have the
familiar."
emotional connection.
Right, right. But she has the wherewithal enough. Like clearly she was using her eyes and figured that out. So this X on the arm is interesting because I think the theory that a lot of people are going with, and this is kind of where my mind jumped to, is that it's obvious. I don't think Luffy put this on his arm at all.
Oh,
Like
of
I
course not. No, I
no.
think Vivi definitely told Morgan to put this
Right,
in
right.
there
She like
as a
doctored
signal
the
to them.
image. Yeah, yeah. She was like,
It
put
it
this on
reminds me
there.
a lot of 3D2Y
Yeah.
and the fact that like Luffy uses the newspaper to get out a message to his crew. This is Vivi getting the message out to the Straw Hats specifically, right? Because they're the only ones that know about this. That it's
Hmm.
like, hey, look, I'm with Morgans, and like Robin points that out here. She's like, this looks different from the rest of the image. Like everything looks scuffed except this. This looks like it was kind of just put on there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So that'll
I
be
have a
interesting.
feeling
Vivi's
we
definitely
said
gonna
it
be a
last
big part
time.
of the arc.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say maybe after the arc. I don't know if she's coming back in Elbaf. She might, because she also was there when they met Dory and Brogy
I
too.
think she's on her way. I think that Vivi. I mean, we've had that long-standing theory, and a lot of people have been saying this, that she's gonna get like Kuma's fruit at some point because of the connection with Lily and like how she supposedly helped spread the poneglyphs and everything, and that was the only way that it might have that's one of the only feasible ways that it could have been done was with the pawpaw fruit. So like I feel like this is an opportunity, and we also think that Kuma is eventually going to die or whatever. We don't see Kuma and Bonnie in this chapter, but I could assume that I think some storylines are going to connect, and I think Elbaf is a perfect place for all that to start happening.
Yeah, and I don't think it's too weird we don't see them. They're probably just waiting in the back of the ship. Like Kuma's probably recovering. Bonnie's a child.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
But cutting to the other crew members, we see they finally escaped, and they're actually in Elbaf now, and it's a giant, snowy like wasteland, and it reminds me of like Drum Island vibes, to be honest, because I feel like we haven't really gotten a lot of snowy places, and that's just the first one my mind goes to.
Well, I mean, like the last one, Egghead was supposed to be a winter island, but obviously it was like weather controlled, right? But like,
yeah,
another thing with that's interesting to me is that the other times we've seen Elbaf, it hasn't been like this. So clearly, on different parts of the island, it's so big that like this, the environment changes from place to place. Like we know for a fact that like in the Big Mom flashback, we saw, the area where it's like more woodsy or whatever, or maybe it's just the seasons that it's more affected by, and like it's winter now or something like that. But I do really like a lot of the paneling in this arc, and I love seeing the scale. Them on the bridge is like so cool.
I think that's one of my favorite parts about this arc so far is just like you said, the scale of everything. Watching them interact on these things, like you can see like Usopp's like barely trying to like get across every single one of these wooden things, and he's scared for his life.
Which is interesting.
He's just chilling on the rope.
Yeah, I think the Usopp thing is actually interesting, and I think we're getting little bits of this at the beginning of the arcs. Like we were saying before about like how Nami had a better showing than Usopp, and she kind of even shows it again here. She's like, oh my god, like this sucks, but like she's doing it, you know what I mean? And Usopp's like cowering, and he's like, well, we have to do this because it's a trial for us to be worthy warriors, and like we can tell that he's trying and he really wants to be like a brave warrior, and this is kind of like setting all that up. So I like that little bit of dialogue from Usopp. I think this is all continuing to be a setup for him. But to kind of segue from that, we all thought that Usopp at some point was gonna like befriend Loki, because Loki in lore is like this like trickster or whatever, and that's kind of how Usopp is, and maybe Usopp will befriend Loki because Loki is kind of one of the more prominent characters that we were like expecting on Elbaf, and obviously Usopp always makes friends with the giants and blah blah blah. So like it'll be interesting to kind of see like how that intersects. But we see Luffy right off the bat say like, hey, you feel that? I'm getting goosebumps. Like he can feel Loki's power, and just to skip to that,
to me,
because,
like Luffy's observation and like just sense of like conquerors, I guess in general, is stronger than everybody else. But the fact that Zoro and Sanji don't feel it like basically at all is kind of crazy.
Yeah, he's getting way up there with the observation. But like this kind of reminds me of like on Egghead when he was like, oh. Someone's coming that's really strong, and it was Kizaru. So it's like Loki, and he was sweating a little bit more for that one than here. He didn't say he was getting goosebumps for Kizaru. He kind of was like, oh my god, they're coming like fast, but that that's Kizaru.
And not only that, but this dude's chained up and locked up. It's not like he has like this malicious intent to kill
Yeah.
Luffy and is coming after them directly.
Well, speaking of
Which,
chained up,
speaking of
let's
that, yeah,
cut right to it. We get Loki's design right at the end here with this crazy panel, and oh my
it's one
god,
of
we
the
were
coldest introductions
whew,
of any. I want to
sheesh.
say villain because it seems like it, but I actually also have a mini theory on that. That I wonder if they're gonna befriend Loki because Oda does this a lot, where he subverts expectations
Mm-hmm.
and he takes a character who you think is gonna be like bad at the beginning and will turn them good and like put them on your side,
Yeah.
or vice versa, right? Like a clear example is with like Pudding. We meet Pudding early on in Whole Cake, and we're like, "Oh, this is going to be a new ally of the Big Mom Pirates," and then boom, she turns out to betray us later on.
Yeah, and one thing I want to talk about is just like his design in general. Super cool. Like we were expecting Loki, like from the Big Mom flashback, right? We get this weird silhouette with that crown, right? That we definitely don't see here. We saw it on the cat that had that crown when we were trapped in the little dungeon Lego area. He had that same crown, but we were expecting Loki to be like kind of like this oafy, doofy kind of guy or whatever. And like, man, Lola turned down this guy, you know? So like, it's
But I
interesting.
don't think it was because of like his looks or anything.
No,
It
no.
must be because like look at this
I
aura
mean,
he
look at this
has.
motherfucker, dude.
Like the dude's like clearly evil. He says it at the end of this chapter. He's like, "I want to bring about the end of the world."
I know.
So like she clearly can sense his bad intentions
I
through all of
yeah,
this.
and just to tie back the crown thing one more time, you do see on his belt the little skull, and the crown looks like that's on that skull. It looks like that same crown that we saw in the flashback. So that, you know, there is some connection there. Um, but yeah, he says he wants to bring down the world, and he says that he's the sun god, which is the second time we're hearing that. You know, giants claiming themselves to be the sun god, and I think that's really interesting because like Luffy doesn't even know he's a sun god, right? And Luffy, I think has. I mean, it's been stated by like a lot of people in a lot of different theories that Luffy is kind of like this Christ figure, right? Just like how Joy Boy was or how Odin was, etc. And I think part of, I don't know if this is necessarily part of just Christian lore or just like people that have been prophets, but they don't like say that they're prophets. They just like kind of become
Yeah, they
like,
don't have that
you
like
know,
ego with them, right? Like it's just always like other people recognize them,
yeah, yeah.
but they're supposed to be like more humble about it
So I
and
think
be
that'll
like,
be a
no,
big
like
thing
I'm
in
just
this
a
arc
human.
is like Luffy learning, maybe not even learning that he's the sun god, but everybody else realizing that he's the sun god, even though all these other people are saying that they're the sun god. So like clearly that's very baked into Elbaf lore. I mean, we saw it with Dory and Brogy, like straight up. I mean, they know obviously, and it's good that we're separate from Dory and Brogy now, because obviously Dory and Brogy would just like tell everybody like, listen, bro, this guy has this like crazy white form where he like is stretchy and like it's like the lore just like lines up, but
Yeah.
nobody's gonna know here with Luffy just explain, and Luffy's not even gonna be able to explain it. Like he's not, you know,
Speaking of other things that Dory and Brogy can't explain, Loki is going to have a devil fruit. Like he killed
yeah,
his father to get this devil fruit that's been passed down, which I'm really curious about what that's gonna be. Because one of the things I think maybe it could be, but I'm a little hesitant on this one, is maybe some form of like shape
I
shifting
was
fruit
thinking that
because
same
that's one
thing.
of
Yeah.
like Loki's main powers in like Norse mythology
Hmm.
is shape shifting and being a trickster. But like Katarina Devon kind of already has that, so I don't know if Oda would
Yeah,
rehash that
and
idea already.
so does Bon Clay. I mean, there's already like a
Yeah,
couple
there's two people
fruits,
with it already,
and
right?
they're already, both of them are like considered to be like really really strong fruits. So I don't know how many, and you know, we've seen other times in One Piece where these fruits kind of like mirror each other. You know, like Ace and Akainu, obviously like Bon Clay and Katarina Devon, like you just said, but like I don't know, like maybe it's some kind of stronger thing. Who knows? And we don't know what type of devil fruit it is either. You know, if there's a third shape shifting fruit, I would imagine it's some kind of. I mean, is Katarina Devon's a zone? She's a mythical zone, right? And then like the other one's a paramecia. So like, is it like some kind of
So Loki,
Logia shape
how would
shifting?
that
Like,
even work?
right. So like, I don't know. Like, we haven't been introduced to a Logia in a long time. Some people are saying that like, and I haven't dealt, you know, read too much into it, that it could be something that we have heard of before, but I don't know of any fruits that we have really like heard of before that this
Well,
could
one thing,
be.
maybe it's not something we've heard of, but something a lot of people have predicted would be a crazy strong fruit What if it's like the water fruit or the ocean
Could be,
fruit or
yeah.
something like that? Which we always assume would be like, hey, if this was ever introduced, that would be crazy OP because we know how badly water affects devil
Right.
fruit users in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, a
So
lot of people thought that that was going to be emu's
emus,
fruit, because emu backward is umi, and umi in Japanese is like the sea, and so like maybe that is a connection. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see like where this goes. Clearly, the only other time we've seen a giant with a devil fruit is San Juan Wolf, who has the giant fruit, I guess. So
yeah,
like,
he's a
it's
lame giant with the fruit because all he does is make himself bigger, which is already what giants are.
yeah. So I don't know, like. Who knows what Loki could have, but clearly it's got to be some broken thing. I mean, on top of the fact that this guy's got to be strong as hell, right? I mean, it could be a shape-shifting thing. Another thing that kind of points in that direction for me is in the Big Mom flashback, him looking like the silhouette he was. Obviously, that could have just been Oda drawing and like not having conceptualized how Loki's design would look yet, but maybe he shape-shifted into something that would be more, okay in Lola's eyes or something like that. But
And then she saw through it with her good intentions.
yeah, but who knows? Um,
One other thing I wanted to mention about this chapter that we haven't talked about is we actually get like a full-scale view of Elbaf itself.
Oh, what a
and
panel!
The giant tree,
Oh, what a
which
panel!
is basically the whole island.
It's Yggdrasil, right? It's this is the real Yggdrasil.
Yeah, I think this has to be like that tree. And we see like waterfalls coming off of it, so they definitely have like reserves of water up there. But I think the most interesting thing is that giant sword, because that's not just a giant sword to us, that's a giant sword to the giants themselves. Like,
yeah.
Look how much bigger that is than the castle and the bridge at the bottom there. And that's what the giants were walking on. So that's like, who could carry that sword? How did it get there?
Well, I have a mini theory about that. I mean, the first thing my mind jumps to is they're talking about the sun god, like everything. Yeah, Luffy, man, dude, Luffy. What if he turns into a giant, just like he did with Kaido, even bigger than that? I mean, Kaido is huge. You know what I mean? Like the scale of Kaido versus Onigashima. You got to think about the scale of Onigashima, right? Like Onigashima was incredibly gigantic compared to them, because like you see the Thousand Sunny pull up to it and it's like microscopic compared to Onigashima. And we know, like, I mean, obviously, scale wise, we can't like pixel scale too much because that's kind of like inconsistent, but the Thousand Sunny is supposed to be as big as like the Colossal Titan, or bigger than that from Attack on Titan. So it's like these things have to be enormous. But Luffy did become huge on Onigashima when he went Gear 5. So I totally think he could like pull the sword, and then maybe that's what signifies to everybody, like, oh my god, that's the sun god. Like everybody can see him like do that shit. You know what I mean?
Kind of like a sword in the stone type of thing.
Yeah.
He's the one that can actually pull it out of the island.
Yeah.
They can recognize him as a sun god.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because we know that Elbaf backwards is Fable, and like this should be like a very mystical arc. So it'd be a nice, like, Sword in the Stone is like another one of those classic stories.
Well, one thing about that, it being Fable, it looks like they've changed the translation of it.
I think it just depends. I think the translation thing is like in some there's on TCB there was a little thing about that under, and I don't know, but overall, like, what a crazy reveal, right? I think that this is what we were waiting for, is to see Elbaf. This is kicking off the arc. They say it's the birthplace of war, the mighty war land. I mean, that's kind of what we were told before by Dory and Brogy when we were first told about Elbaf, is that like it's all about war on Elbaf. You know what I mean? It's gonna take them a long time to navigate this whole place. This is gonna be a big arc for sure.
Yeah, I wonder. I have a feeling it's going to be bigger than Egghead, which was, I think, one of the longer arcs we've had in the series. It was like 60-something chapters, which is pretty crazy in itself. But overall, like, this chapter just had a lot of information about it. I'm really glad we're getting something like this finally now to start out Elbaf.
Yeah.
Like, the other parts were fun, but this is what we came for.
Yeah. The only last thing I kind of want to talk about before we kind of hop off here, I mean, we can go so in depth with this chapter, and I'm sure we're going to find out so much more, but we got a lot of new giant pirate stuff in this chapter. Like, we meet the cook and we meet the doctor, which is cool. So and they're talking about Hydran, and one thing that we got a drop of is that Hydran is actually a prince. of Elbaf, which we had no idea before. Like he was just a pirate. So clearly he's much more important to this lore than anything else. And is he Loki's brother? Was I?
Yeah, so they
Yeah.
should be brothers. Loki should be his younger brother,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, you would gotta think Hydran must hate Loki more than most people because he killed his father. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Loki killed his own father, but like that's also Hydran's father.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he probably has some sort of grudge against
Yeah,
him.
and I wonder if like it's like what you were saying, like maybe this guy is a good guy in the end, and it's just like a reverse of what we think because, um, yeah,
I mean, maybe he killed like his father because his father told, like maybe
or
it was
or
like
maybe his
part of some
father was bad and was like
prophecy.
trying to take over the world or something like that, or like this guy thought it was prophesized. I think there's two ways you can go with it. It's like it's either that or this guy is being parallel to like Doflamingo. You know what I mean? Because Doflamingo killed his dad for power,
Yeah.
and then if we look back to Corazon, like that would be the parallel for Hydruden.
Which makes me again think it could be like him being a good guy because we've already done that story. Which,
Right.
granted, Oda's not like super shy about redoing certain like concepts,
No.
but I don't know. One of the other things, also, just to end it off on that same note, is the fact that he says he's gonna end the world is basically just him saying like I'm gonna start Ragnarok, which is kind
Yeah.
of what a lot of us were thinking anyways coming
Yeah,
into
like
this
he.
arc,
So
right?
that's interesting because, like, obviously, like Elbaf, their whole religion, or I guess religious followings, is like they very much follow the prophecy of the sun god. It's seeming, and so all of them either are saying they're the sun god or like wanting to, and obviously it being the birthplace of war and everybody like expecting this Ragnarok thing. There's got to be some people, Loki obviously, that wants to be the person that starts it, which I think
I
is
mean,
really
what if he's
interesting.
the one that starts Ragnarok by helping them destroy the Red Line, which we assume is gonna happen at
Yeah,
some
it
point,
could
right?
be. Well, I think it's gonna be. I think Luffy's gonna start Ragnarok. I think that like because he's saying like I'm the sun god, I'm gonna start Ragnarok, but we know Luffy's the sun god, so like Luffy's got to be the one to like start some shit, and like obviously he was the one prophesized to destroy Fishman Island way back when. I don't know. I think it's gonna end up. We are gonna see Ragnarok by the end of this arc, and I think that, like we said before, my personal belief is that Elbaf is gonna lead into the final war because of that. So,
Yeah, I think that can definitely happen.
but that's gonna wrap it up for us, you guys. Let us
There's only
know.
one sad thing about this
Oh my
chapter, I will
god.
say
Oh
though.
yeah.
There's an extra long break this time, guys. But I will
Uh.
say it is for good reasons.
Mhm.
It's not because Oda's sick or injured or anything, which is nice. It's because he said he wants to do more research for the chapter, which gives me a
Mhm.
lot of high hopes. Like, obviously he's definitely done a bunch of research and knows what he wants, but this is gonna help him like
Right.
plan everything out meticulously,
Of
which I think is gonna
I
be
think it's
super
I think
nice.
it's important too. Yeah, and there was also that announcement that he's going to be doing a 10 question interview, which is cool. He's going to answer like 10 big questions, so that'll be interesting to see. Stay tuned for that. But yeah, break next week. But we're gonna keep on delivering content to you guys. Let us know what you guys think about this chapter in the comments below. Give us all your theories, all your juicy theories. You guys think
Yeah,
that
you guys must
Loki
have a lot
is
also.
Loki? I mean, he's got to be the strongest giant we ever saw. If Dory and Brogy are 1.8, like what would this guy's bounty be? I mean, obviously the Elbaf giants are on a whole other level, and they don't really even get considered by the government most of the time. I mean, these guys aren't even pirates, and he's like saying that he's going to bring about the end of the whole world. So he's got to be on some kind of crazy level. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's definitely got to be up there in terms of power scaling, which I will love to do a little bit later on, is to power scale all of this.
Yeah, yeah. We'll power scale it soon, you guys. All right, y'all.
Yeah. Peace out.
Peace.